And moving right along with the Federation changes in Triptychs Mod version 3.8a, there have been a lot of changes to the Federation that are, a lot of them are ships shuffling around where they are built or whose avatar they belong to, and a lot of changes with warp-ins. So for Mason, he has, his unique ships are now the Nova, which is actually an alternate Canaveral, and the Norway. While Risner's unique classes are the Canaveral and the Phalanx, which I forgot to place. And the Avalon is now the special experimental ship of the Federation. There you go. So, with the tech tree, I believe very little has changed here, except there is an experimental yard. It requires Starfleet Science. Its default ship is the Avalon, and then its special ships are the Remora, Akhira, Monsoon, and Defiant. Oh, I didn't place them, did I? Oh, well. So, from the Sabre has received the raid passive, which means it deals bonus damage to constructors and freighters. It also builds faster than it did previously. So the idea is it's supposed to be at least a little bit useful. Around 4 Sabres can kill mining ships very effectively. Like if there's a yard, like if there was a yard here and a mining station here, 4 Sabres could kill a miner before it goes all the way around to get in. Or like if they ambush it right when it's entering the yard, you know, right when it's entering the refinery to repair, 4 Sabres can kill it pretty fast. Because they have the raid passive, they have had their sensor range reduced though, so it can actually not, it cannot see as far as it can shoot. So you're going to want to accompany it with a scout or even a Monsoon or something with better vision. The Monsoon has changed very little, except it has slightly higher cost and lower build time than it did before. Same with the Intrepid, although these special abilities have obviously been buffed. The Akhira has had a huge buff to its special. The previous special increased its shield regeneration by like 2 or 3 points per second. This one increases it by 20 points, so it does get decent. Like if it's only fighting 1 or 2 enemy ships, it will be able to out-repair them. But when the game gets bigger and, you know, there's 10 ships, it's still going to die. The Miranda 2 is now a special Antares Yard ship available for both avatars that requires chassis level 3. Chassis level 3 also requires an errata yard. So you're going to have an Antares Yard, errata yard, and all 3 chassis levels before you can build these, but now both avatars can build them, and anybody who's used them before knows they're gross. They're a really powerful ship, especially when their special is active. The Excelsior 2 has received very little, however, its torpedoes can fire 360 degrees. I'm probably going to put it back on limited arc and just have it be 360 degree when its special is active in future versions. Because that was the real problem, was you didn't want to lock it down with its special because they just fly behind you. The Remora has had its range increasing special removed, and it has received the antimatter mine special. It also has received a large vision range and speed upgrade. So it's now a very fast-moving ship.
All power to engines.
Yep. The Defiant has not received many stat changes, although it's received a cost reduction and a build time reduction. The Sovereign now costs more supplies, but has increased stats. In addition, the Sovereign is a command ship. I guess, for Risner, that's her only command ship. So for Mason, for the Nova and the Canaveral, they've been divided into 2 ships. They both have long range and fast tracking computers as a profile, and they both have very similar weapons. And their specials are mostly similar as well. Risner's is similar to the old sensor synergy. It has to have a friendly station nearby. When she activates it, the ship becomes stationary. However, it's going to grant a strategic vision buff to nearby stations. There you see, there it goes off. So now I have a huge vision off of that station. The ship also has a cloak detect ping that goes off while it's in this mode. Whereas the Nova doesn't require a station, it simply becomes stationary and gives you strategic vision. However, its range is slightly lower. For their first specials, or their second specials, the Nova gets a plasma bolt, which disables weapons, and the Canaveral, which has higher cost and stronger combat stats, has a new version of EC3M that basically causes everything to miss for 8 seconds. It is invulnerable, but it also doesn't cause enemies to stop targeting it. So if the enemy was targeting it, they're going to keep shooting it and all their shots are going to miss. This is basically similar to the old cover fire. So you could build combat canaverals, and they could be pretty dangerous in combat sometimes. And then for the third ability, the Nova gets the fleet supply special, similar to how it was before, except it affects both photon and quantum torpedoes. And the canaveral has the sensor blackout, similar to before. Reduces rate of fire on enemy ships by a ton. The other Mason ship is the Norway, which requires chassis level 2, and it is a command ship. It's also pretty fast. It only affects smaller ships. Doesn't affect battleships, so it doesn't affect any of these, I believe. But it affects all of your Antares ships. So this is a earlier way to get the command bonus. In addition, well, I'll get to this in a second. The Phalanx hasn't changed at all. It's not even here. The Warpins. So the Warpins have been changed. Now they require chassis levels. So every Warpin takes 4 slots, because your basic ships take 1 slot and your center Warpins all take 2 slots. And every chassis level you research upgrades 4 slots for you. So you can have 1 Warpin on the field at a time with level 1, 2 with level 2, and 3 with level 3. Also, the Sovereign has a special where... Oh, I didn't make an icon for it yet. The Sovereign increases your Warpin cap by 2. So for every 2 Sovereigns you build, you could have another Warpin on the map. In addition, let's see, actually, Excelsior didn't change. The Sensor Nebula, when it activates its special, it does gain a cloak detect ping. It doesn't go off for 10 it goes off 10 seconds after it's started, so there it goes. It's a small ping, but it does have one if you really need cloak detect. And the Centaur has also received the raid passive that deals extra damage to constructors and freighters. These ships have all received command passive. They do not affect battleships, so they're not going to affect Phalanx or Avalons, and obviously the Sovereign can't be affected. I don't know if they affect Defiance. Shoot, I'll have to test that. But basically, all of your center Warpins will serve as command ships, which means your wing Warpins will gain the command. And we'll see if this goes away. Or maybe I even described it here. Okay, yeah, non-battleships. Okay, so Defiance don't gain a command bonus from these. It has to be a Sovereign. In addition, I don't think there have been any major changes. I think the Rigel moves a bit faster. Oh, I changed the torpedo pod on this. Rather than costing supply, it's just a toggle. So when it's turned off, you have a torpedo. When you toggle it, you gain the specials, but the torpedo launcher is disabled. So you can leave it on and just, you can use your specials as you want to, or you can turn it off. Basically, it doesn't cost 5 supply to activate like it did before. This Nova is pretty much the same as it was previously, except it has the command, and it has the fleet supply, which affects ships with both photon and quantum torpedoes. The descent has been modified, so it has a shorter recharge time on its shield reset. However, resets do not affect descents, so it can't recharge its own shields with the shield reset, and 2 descents can't support each other. But they can shield reset more often on other ships, and the range is longer than it used to be. For the strategic Warpin, I have actually taken out the Teutoburg temporarily. I might put it back in eventually, but right now it just calls in 2 steam runners. Each steam runner takes up 2 slots. Anybody who played older versions knows that the steam runner is super awesome. It has a special ability that lets it fire 6 shots in a row. It might only get 5 there, yeah. It has a very nasty special, especially when 2 of them bring it in, or if you had 2 Warpins worth, if you had 4 of these, you'll take down a station very fast. Also, when the steam runner hits veteran, it ignores shields and does direct hull damage. So 1 veteran steam runner can take down most buildings. They're really dangerous. For the experimental stuff, the Borg experimental is a Remora that can use the nanite special ability and has increased stats. The Dominion one is an Akhira that gains bonus torpedo launchers and can use the excessive strike special ability, which does direct hull damage to several targets. The Klingon one is a Monsoon, where its proximity torpedo it costs less, so it can cast it multiple times, and it disables weapons on the target for 2 seconds. This is a This is an intense micro way to defeat cloakers and like spheres that are using regeneration specials. Is you see them escaping or wanting to cloak, you throw a proxy torpedo down on them, and it will disable their weapons for 2 seconds, which causes them to decloak. Or if they were regenerating, it causes them to stop regenerating until it's turned on again. So that makes it a very nasty cloak hunter. And the Romulan Tech Defiant, as everybody knows, its stats are slightly lower than Risner's Defiant, but it can cloak, which is awesome. And I believe this is all of the Federation changes in a nutshell. Let's see. Like the other factions, the mining stations are slightly more expensive than they were before. And the Starbase has its own upgrades. Oh, right. The Starbase in economy upgrade is the manufacturing industrial replicators, which it transforms resources into supplies, and it does it very slowly over time. Its rate is 4-to-1, I believe. So the first supply buy is actually cheaper than using this. It's equivalent to a supply buy that costs 1,000, but you can just sort of keep it going in the background forever. I forgot to mention with my Dominion video that the Dominion economic upgrade is similar. It's slightly less efficient. It does, or I forget exactly how much it costs, but it can turn resources into supplies or supplies into resources. So if you're really, ahead on supplies later on, you can use the Dominion Starbase to start converting a resource or supply back into mineral resources. Thinking, is that everything? I think that's everything. We're calling it everything. The Mason torpedo turrets have been affected very heavily by the fact that in Triptych's mod, torpedo weapons on stations can miss. So I found even like 4 or 5 Sabres can actually survive decently well around a Mason torpedo platform for a while, because the torpedo will be having like a 45% hit chance against them. Yeah, I have nothing else to say about the Feds, so I'm just going to end this video and move on to the Klingons. Oh, what I did forget to say was Risner receives a cost reduction in her chassis levels. This is a Mason one, so he has the more expensive ones, but Risner's are all 25% cheaper, and Mason receives a discount to supply buys. So for him, actually, the supply conversion is actually not good until he's done several supply buys. It's not a big advantage. I think it's a 10% reduction in 10% reduction in supply buys.